Hello, welcome back to Blender LIVENODING. In this episode, I want to share this node setup using geometry nodes in Blender 3.1 Alpha. So basically, it's kind of like the matrix of stones and worms, or maybe like pebbles and and worms. This was actually interesting because in the latest version of geometry nodes, we actually have geometry to instance. So this single node can take any geometry and turn it into instance, so we can kind of scatter it. In this case, I'm scattering it into a grid. So let's simplify this a little bit. So I basically started with a grid. Okay, grid with each grid is 10 by 10 grid, and then I turn it into an array using instance on points, and then realize the instance and turning it into mesh to points. So it's like a grid, and then I simply multiply the grid using this mesh line, so I can control the number of array. So it's simply I just make this to get the points, kind of like a 3D grid. And then I'm using that mesh to points to generate points, like 3D points, and then using it as reference to my instance objects. My instance objects is this pebble and also the worms. Okay, so there are two objects that's actually hidden inside these geometry nodes. The rest of them is simply just like random scaling and random rotations. So that's I think this one should be minus tau divided by 2. This one is tau divided by 2, so we have proper rotations. Yeah, and then shade smooth. So let's take a look inside this setup, pebbles and worms. If you look carefully, each pebbles and each worms is actually different. Yeah, I think they should be different, slightly different, and because I'm using this random seeding for each one of the instance, so this is quite incredible. Let's take a look at the pebble first. So we have random value plugged into the seed. Inside this, there's a group of nodes. Inside the group, inside this group nodes, we have random vector first of all. So there's a random vector to generate the pebbles, and I'm setting it into this mesh line, so it's resetting the position of the mesh line, so I can actually control the count of the line, and I can control the length of this line. But anyway, this will randomize the position of the lines and then turning it into convex hull, and I'm using dual mesh to get more interesting shape. And then I subdivide it and set the material to stone. So there's a stone material to give like a random color. While with the worms, I have also random seeding. So random seed, and then plug into this worm with a bunch of parameters, and I can control the radius of the worm. I can control the number of cut of the worms. I think I've done this in the past, and I can control the length of the worm. Okay, that's probably more interesting. I like this one because it's simply like a shapes, like a 3D shapes and the strokes. It's the simplest thing in 3D that you can combine together. Let's take a look at the worm itself. This is also really simple. I've shown you a couple of times. It's basically a curve to mesh, like a sweep. So there's a small curve that's being swept into this line. So we have like the worm shape. So this line is basically just a mesh line that has been offset using random value. I could have used noise as well, to get nicer looking worms. I think that's possible also if we do it like this. We don't have random seed. I think I will, for the seed I will plug into the W and then the color into the offset. So with this we have a different type of worms, and we can use vector math to multiply the scale of the noise. It's offset slightly, so maybe just add a minus 0.5 there, so it's reset the position. Yeah, more or less that's the setup. Maybe less cut is better for these worms. The length and this value is not affecting anything because I haven't plugged it into the noise. Okay, I think this is correct. So we have a bunch of worms and bunch of stones, pebbles, and we have this kind of artwork just placed inside the grid. And I'm using cycles, I think cycles X, experimental or supported. Let me take a look. System. Okay, I didn't turn on the GPU. Okay, now it's gonna be a lot faster, but it just need to recompile one time, and then now it's rendering really fast with the denoise turned on by default. I can turn it off, so we have this noisy picture. Okay, so if you ever want to change the distribution of points, you can do that, of course. Just plug it into something else. Mesh primitive cylinder grid. I think we need something that's more interesting, but try cone. Plug this into the point. Okay, we have, and then just distribute points on faces. So we have distributed worms and stones on the cone. That's probably not so interesting, so we need a Suzanne. Plug this here. Distribute some worms on Suzanne. I think, yeah, we need to turn it into relative. Okay, so we have some distributions of geometry instance on Suzanne. So that's basically the setup. I think we should be able to control the distribution of instance somehow using this index, instance index actually. I think you can have like either 0 or 1, right? Because we have only 2 instances and we are distributing, for example, this is the worms, or we actually want the pebble. So you control this value into the instance. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Feel free to just modify this setup, but it's basically just I'm just testing out these features. Yeah, hopefully this is useful. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.